So I just got the chance to play over 3 hours of 007 First Light and sit down with Andreas Kralk, who is the gameplay director on the game. I asked him a bunch of questions, including many of which I got from you guys, both in the comment section and in chat over on Luke Stevens Live, my live channel, and I found out a lot about the game. This is, of course, the upcoming 007 game coming from IO Interactive, the same developers behind Hitman. And it really is a match made in heaven. Like, I seriously can't think of another studio that would be like more perfectly suited to make a 007 game. It's the Hitman guys making a 007 game. I mean, it's like perfect. It's amazing. But perhaps the most surprising aspect of the game is that when it was originally revealed, it wasn't necessarily the Hitman inspirations that really stuck with people. It was rather that the game seemed to take a lot of learnings from Naughty Dog, and specifically Uncharted. In fact, one of the most common ways the game has been described by people that have seen it so far is that it looks like Uncharted meets Hitman, which is a combination I never knew I needed. But it was all just based on vibes and impressions based on the trailers, because nobody had played the game at that point. That's changed now. I got access to over 3 hours with the game. An early game level in Iceland, which set the stage for the story, and then a tutorial section where you learn the ropes of combat and how stealth worked. And then it opened up into a late game chapter with a lot of spoilers that I will obviously not get into, but showcased a lot of cinematic storytelling, a lot of large set pieces, and also an extremely vast level with a ton of gameplay complexity. And they even encouraged us to go back through that late game level multiple times if we were able to within the time frame we had to try out different strategies and experiment with different options. And overall, after that time and after speaking with Andreas about some of the design choices, asking him questions like whether this was something truly unique or if it was just Hitman in a tuxedo, I am pretty confident that this game is pretty awesome. I do think some people will find it very frustrating for a reason I'll get into a little bit later, but that frustration is precisely why I think so many people are going to absolutely love it. In the same way that a lot of people are frustrated with like Hitman, where things are so open-ended and levels are open to your own exploration and determination for how to best achieve one specific goal. That DNA is still very much in 007 First Light, and that means that people are going to come across their own unique solutions to all of the different challenges they come across while playing the game. But that also means that it's going to be up to the players to find those solutions. Meaning, if you're looking for a very strict railroad type experience, like you might be accustomed to coming off of, say, an Uncharted game, you're probably going to struggle with this one more. Because at its core, it has Hitman DNA within it. This is an IO interactive game, but it truly is Hitman meets Uncharted. You get the cinematic fidelity, storytelling, and set pieces you would expect from Uncharted, but you get the gameplay complexity of Hitman. In a lot of ways, it's the best of both worlds, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But before I get into the specifics, I want to disclose something very, very clearly up front. We were not allowed to capture our own footage at the event. We played on PCs. They were beefy PCs. They ran the game phenomenally well. I didn't have any performance issues as far as I can remember. Like, no frame drops, no hitching. I didn't have any crashes. It ran very, very well, which is refreshing considering that performance was a big question mark after the initial reveal, which showed a lot of frame drops on console. However, we didn't see it on console, so we don't know how it runs there. And because I don't have my own gameplay footage, I can't demonstrate firsthand to you that it ran well for me. It's just kind of like a trust me, bro. Instead, they provided a lot of B-roll of everything that we played, which is what you'll be seeing throughout this video, but just understand it's not my capture. I did ask them about this directly, why they chose to not let us capture directly, and it was communicated to me that it seemed that it was a logistical issue where they just weren't able to figure out how to do that efficiently, capturing all this footage for people playing the game in every place that they went to. They did previews in like Shanghai and I think London as well. And so they were spread out really thin, and they said it was a logistical choice. Whether you accept that or not is up to you. I'm just telling you what they told me. What I can say is that the gameplay footage I have does reflect my experience with the game in terms of performance. However, console performance is still a question mark because, again, we played on PC. Now, with that out of the way, let's start at the beginning of the preview. Like I said, we got to start at the very beginning of the game. The moment you boot up from the main menu, we play through the title sequence, which I won't show you for sake of spoilers because it's pretty cool. And then the story goes into action right from the outset. This is a 007 origin story through and through. So when you first start playing the game, you are not playing as 007. You are playing as an up-and-coming soldier who's trying to prove his worth in a very difficult situation after a deployment goes very bad. It sets the stage for the high-stakes cinematic story that they're going to tell, and immediately I was taken back by just how beautiful the game was. Like, I don't know how to say it other than I don't think the trailers do this game justice. Like, the trailers look good, don't get me wrong, but in person, playing this in real time on a high refresh rate display, like it just hits different, dude. This is a gorgeous game. The sound design is also fantastic from the getup. The voice acting is all very, very well done. And across the board, the game just makes a really good first impression. The first level sets the stage with gameplay, with basic traversal and movement, and then a couple of pretty straightforward stealth sequences teaching you the basics of how to move behind cover and get from objective to objective. I'll keep all of this vague, of course, because there's story spoilers here, but overall, it does a good job of introducing the story. It makes sense and it's well executed. The next section of gameplay we got was basically a training level when you're learning how to be an agent in Her Majesty, or I guess it's now His Majesty's service. I'm not used to saying that. That sounds weird, but I guess because there's a king now, it's His Majesty. I don't know. That's weird. I don't think I'd said His Majesty's service yet until this very moment. So there you go. In America, we don't talk about the king very much. I know it's shocking, but he doesn't come up in casual conversation. Anyway, this is the tutorial section where you'll get your first taste of what more expansive levels will offer. You start the level in the center of a very large rectangle, basically, with a lot of different rooms and traversal paths and a lot of NPCs crowding the rooms. It will be very familiar if you've played Hitman. I mean, it's set up very much like that with many different options and tools at your disposal. And even though this is a really short level, I think the first time I went through it, I was through it in like 10 to 15 minutes. I did try cranking up the difficulty and going through it again with a different route. And bro, this is where I realized what we were doing here. Like, this is one of those games where if you play on the easy setting, you can get into a fist fight with 15 people and you'll be okay. And you can brute force your way through missions, even if you're getting discovered. If you play it on hard, you cannot do that. They will kill you. And so it forces you to play super tactically. It forces you to think about your routes and your tools and how to distract this guy to go over there so you can get this guy and do this. It's really, really important which difficulty setting you choose, because the game plays totally differently depending on that difficulty setting. Like, I think this is one of those games some people will play on easy and then be frustrated that the gameplay wasn't that interesting. But if you crank the difficulty up to either the second normal setting or the hard setting, it's like a totally different game. And they obviously know this, which is why they encouraged us to try the final level on the easy difficulty and then go back in with a higher difficulty to experiment with different options and see how things played out differently. The game is also built with a really robust checkpoint and chapter system. So within each of the main sections of the game, like each level, there are different checkpoints as you go through the different story beats. So if you want to replay a level, but just see how you get through this part of the level with a really high difficulty, you can load back into that specific story beat and experience that again with a different tactic or with a different route, which is going to be a godsend, I'm sure, for speedrunners. But it was really cool for me to be able to be like, I wonder if I could get around this guard if I did this. Let me just load back in there and try it. And sure enough, it worked. It's really well done. In this tutorial section, though, you will learn the ropes of both hand-to-hand combat. You'll learn the ropes of shooting and stealthing your way around the environment. And it's very viable. No matter which route you take, they've built it out so that it works. Again, none of this is going to be surprising if you know Hitman. Like, none of it. It's very much Hitman in its DNA, and they've retained a lot of that complexity here. When I interviewed Andreas about the game, I did ask him how they balanced like making just Hitman in a tuxedo versus something fresh and different, and his answers were interesting. I'll just let him talk and explain it.
What type of game is this? Is this just Hitman in a tuxedo, right? And it can sound a little bit like that when I speak about it like this, and obviously we've taken inspiration because we think we've had some good stealth gameplay in Hitman, and those we are carrying over because we think it's pretty good. But then we add all the combat and abilities on top of that, and all the cinematic experience also, as you're talking about here, juggling between back and forth of this, right? Where I think in general one of the key selling points is also that it varies a lot what type of experience you're engaging with, right? Also, I talked about the pacing wise that, okay, sometimes after a narrow segment where you have a big set piece, you need an open space to play a little round in, and then it probably narrows in again a little bit and out again. So it kind of breathes as you're going through the game. So variety is one of our key ways to experience this game too. And with that, I think it's important. It's also like kind of a message you want to get out there that to consume this as its own game, like play it and start it and expect that this is a Bond game, not a Hitman game necessarily. And again, obviously, we've taken some inspirations and all the mechanics that we knew we thought were good. We've taken them over, right? But I think you should experience it as its own game, and think you're playing a Bond game and go into it with that sense, and not think that I'm picking up a new Hitman game just with another skin, because then you'll probably be disappointed.
Because it's just not what it is. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, having played the game for hours at this point, I think everything he said is completely accurate. But what was really interesting to me is how they tried to balance it all out. Because Hitman, of course, is all Hitman. It's all gameplay. It's all complex solutions to dynamic problems. It's what it's known for, and it's the strength of that studio and of the game. But with 007 First Light, of course, they're balancing a very cinematic story at the same time. So they have to make sure that they can tell that story through linear sections that are more rigid, and then also have those moments where things open up and allow the player to have a lot of agency. This final level is a fantastic example of that balance, and I think it demonstrates really cleanly and clearly how they've struck a really good balance with it. This final chapter that we got to experience opens up with James going back through an apartment that has been abandoned for a reason I will not get into. Spoilers, of course. I just don't want to spoil it. So he's walking through an apartment when all of a sudden he's jumped. This assassin comes at James, but he's able to fight him off. But then he's faced with the challenge of escaping the apartment with his life, while also taking down the other assassin, which is outside with a sniper rifle. This is a linear narrative moment that transitions into a fairly rigid combat sequence, and then goes into another fairly straightforward linear narrative mixed with gameplay beat going after the assassin, and then it fully transitions into an open-ended gameplay sequence, which is totally different. Like, I don't know if this is how your brain works. This is how my brain works. I'm a visual thinker. So like, this is how I would describe the game. And I know to you, this might just look like an intestine that's swelling, but I swear it makes sense in my head. Like, you'll go from these narrow sections where the player can bounce around a little bit, but it's pretty strict in what you need to do. And then it opens up to gameplay. And you might have one player that goes over and goes through the area that way. You might have another player that goes over here and just is bouncing all over the place and then goes in. And it's also reflective of like the gameplay time. Some players will effectively just kind of make a beeline straight through. Others are going to spend tons of time going all around, doing all sorts of stuff before they find their way out, which is also okay. But this is kind of the flow of 007, where it's all connected with these tighter cinematic linear sections with big open gameplay sections, and it constantly is contracting and breathing. And when I talked to Andreas, he was mentioning how they're always trying to balance that. So if you have a big story beat where something really intense and emotional happens, they have to balance it out in terms of gameplay with a moment that maybe is a little bit more light. Like if this section right here is super depressing and sad, somebody important dies or is injured or something, they have to then come up with a gameplay sequence that eases you into the next section so that it's not just constant misery or just super depressing, or that maybe if you're emotionally taxed here, they've got to make sure that the gameplay is not really intensive, at least at first, so that your mind has time to kind of process what just happened. And that's the balancing act that's always difficult in a narrative game that's trying to do gameplay as well. But what struck me about 007 is that like again, this isn't just Uncharted where they'll go into a shooting arena and that's that. They go from story beat into expansive level with all sorts of different mechanics, whether it be bluffing guards to distracting them to get a key card in order to open this door, to get access to this guy who has info about getting into this room, etc., etc. Like, it's basically the flow of Uncharted, but with way more gameplay complexity, which is awesome. And I will say it played out differently for everybody that I saw, at least. A couple of friends of mine were there at the event as well, and they also played through 3 hours of the game, and they had totally different experiences in some of the levels, doing things in a totally different way, which again is exactly what you would hope to see in a game like this, is that the story, of course, is going to play out similarly for everybody because those are story beats and everything has to hit the same way. It's a linear story about James Bond. Like, it's going to play out the same for everybody. But when it comes to the gameplay, that's where player agency really kicks in. And I'm glad to say that they've retained the same agency, or at least close to it, that they had with Hitman. But this is why I said some people might find this format a little frustrating. To use the same visual aid, if we take our swollen intestines and we reformat it into the shape of like an Uncharted game, for example, I think it ends up looking much more like this, just much less extreme. And so you do get a little bit of gameplay variety, but for the most part, everybody's going to be going through the path in the same way. And there's much less variability in those moments and experiences. But 007 First Light is designed for you to go to the extremes and try things in a totally different way. And that's when you'll have the most fun, is when you really do try to come up with a wacky solution to something that you're faced with. Another way of saying this is that I think if you play 007 First Light as its own game, as a unique package, you will have a lot more fun with it than if you try to brute force it the way you've previously played just Hitman games or the way you've previously played Uncharted games. It really is its own thing, because Hitman might just be this and this and this. It's not trying to do this little thing, really cinematic, high production value, like set pieces and story beats. It's just not trying to do that. That's not what it's about. And that's okay. Those games are great even with that, because they do the gameplay so well. And in the same vein, if you try to play this game like you play an Uncharted game, you're probably also not going to have an amazing time, because you're going to be frustrated that the gameplay is constantly challenging you to do things crazy different, and it's just not something you're used to. They really do have a unique package here, is what I'm trying to say. And I really, really like it. But it's important that you go into it with the proper expectations of how it works. And how it works is pretty robust as well. They have a lot of individual tools and items that James can use. And these are all powered basically with recharges that you collect in the environment. So if you want to use like a poison dart effectively to make a guard sick, you have to collect chemicals around the environment. It encourages you to look in nooks and crannies for that. Similarly, you need charge in order to use your electronics devices, which can be used to hack things or to shoot things down. In addition, of course, to a lot of other tools and abilities that you will, of course, be seeing in gameplay, and you'll also see in the final version of the game. All of these tools can be used to deal with environmental challenges or puzzles, to work your way around guards, distract them, or to create environmental hazards that might be able to take a guard out for you. When things go bad, you have the ability to fist fight, and of course, there are weapons and guns for you to use as well, whether it be a gun that James carries on his person or a gun that he picks up from a guard that he just eliminated. The animation work is all really well done, and what really stood out to me was the fist fighting and the contextual moves that they built out for it. Basically, if you're in a fist fight with a guard and you're standing next to a windowsill or a table or a car hood or something, you will see James Bond automatically recognize that he's next to that object, and then he will do a unique combat animation to like curb stomp the guard into the windowsill. Or if you're next to a desk or a billiards table, he'll go and grab the guard and chuck him across it. You can also pick up objects in the environment and throw them at guards. So if you're standing next to that billiards table or pool table, I'm gonna be honest, I don't play pool or billiards. I don't really know the difference. And I'm not going to pretend to. All I know is it's green and there's balls on it. But if you're standing next to it, you can pick up the balls and chuck them at guards, which I can only imagine how much that hurts, but you can just chuck all these balls at the guards if you want to. And I was really impressed at just how smooth and seamless everything seemed to tie together. It reminded me of the contextual finishers in like Batman Arkham Knight, which I say as a point of high praise. And even with all of that gameplay dynamism, right as you finish the fight, it can transition seamlessly into a cutscene, play out a cutscene without skipping a beat, taking you to different environments even, and then seamlessly transition back into an expansive gameplay segment. It's really smooth. And like I said earlier, I got the chance to experiment with different difficulty settings as well, and these difficulty settings make it so like enemies deal more damage to you, or they'll make it so like those resources you collect actually refill more slowly. So, you know, whereas previously a bottle might have filled up your meter halfway, now it fills it up just a little bit, so you have to collect more in order to use your tools, which makes them more scarce. It makes you more tactical with when you use them. And having experimented with even the same part of a level on easy, normal, and then hard difficulty levels, I will say your experience will be totally different depending on that difficulty modifier. In a lot of ways, they play like totally different games on easy versus hard. Like, I usually, when I play games like this, I play it on normal, like whatever the default difficulty is, because I want to experience it the same way the vast majority of people will experience it. But I'm gonna be real, I would seriously consider playing this on hard just because it forces you to basically play like James Bond. If you play on easy, you can kind of just play it like an Uncharted game and just kind of punch and fight your way through, and it's not that big of a deal and it's whatever. But if you play this on normal or hard, like it feels like a totally different game, and it forces you to think like a spy and to be really tactical. And I love it. But to just wrap up my overarching thoughts on all of it, I'm really impressed. I think that this is just about exactly the kind of 007 game I was hoping to see. It is cinematic, it is highly polished, it is expansive, and they are trying to tell a story in a very cinematic way, but they still have managed to retain the same gameplay complexity and dynamism that we know and love from Hitman. It's a game that on higher difficulties asks a lot more of you, the player, but if you're willing to meet it with those requests and with what it demands of you on those higher difficulty levels, it will genuinely like blow you away at just how robust all of these systems are. The investments in the increased production value are also hard to ignore. They clearly have put a lot of effort into overhauling their engine to make this type of game possible, and it's a beauty. Even so, I do still have questions about performance specifically on console, considering we always kind of guessed that the PC version would run well, and having tried it for 3 hours, I can attest it runs well. The console version is the one that was having performance issues in the reveal back last year, and they did delay the game since its original launch date. When I asked Andreas about this specifically, he said that, yeah, of course, they're polishing, they're doing a ton of bug fixing, and they're focused on polishing, and that's what the delay is all about. And sure enough, I think that it's benefiting from that delay, but I just want to stress that we still have not seen what modern, like current PS5 footage looks like. So if you're going to be playing on console, I would probably wait until we get a clearer idea of that, just simply because the initial announcement was pretty rough in terms of overall performance. But what I can say is that the game itself, if they can get it running really well, I think is shaping up to be something pretty cool. But as for further information, we're all just gonna have to sit and wait until the game launches later in May 27th, I believe. If you'd like more gaming info, check out my second channel, Luke Stevens Live. And if you want to see where I actually was for this event, you can actually see a video I just did on the live channel where I actually went to Pershing Square, which you may remember as the actual location where Michael in GTA 5 smoked a doobie and then thought he was seeing aliens. It's the actual location where that mission was based in. And I sat there and we talked about the Black Flag resynced reveal and everything. It was kind of fun. So I recommend you go check that out. But with that, thank you for watching. Thank you to Andreas for sitting down with me and talking about the game. If you guys would like to see the full interview or at least more of the information that he gave me, feel free to let me know in the comment section, and maybe on stream we'll go through those questions and answers and we'll be able to dig into it a little more deeply than I was able to in this video. But with that, my friends, thank you for watching. Much love. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.